Good evening, and welcome to Ballot Meridian Township Supervisor Debate live on HOMTV. My name is Eric Sherman. Tonight is Wednesday, October 19th, and we want you to participate in this evening's debate by calling in with your questions for the candidates at 517-349-1232, or you can tweet or Facebook a question to HOMTV, #BallotMeridian. For the next hour, you will have the opportunity to ask your questions of the candidates running for the Meridian Township Supervisor race, and we welcome Republican candidate Tom Klunzinger and Democratic candidate Ronald J. Styka. The phone lines are now open, so call in with your questions at 517-349-1232, or again, you could tweet or Facebook us at HOMTV, #BallotMeridian. If you'd like to ask a question for tonight's candidates, they must be phrased in such a way that both candidates can answer the question. You cannot answer a question specifically at one candidate. I want to thank the candidates for joining us this evening, and we're going to start with a brief introduction. We're going to start alphabetically by the last name. So with you, Mr. Tom Klunzinger, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Tom Klunzinger, Republican candidate for supervisor. As we now know from the vicious Democratic primary, the real issue in this election is who is best able to counteract Treasurer Brixey and her schemes to control the township board. My opponent has shown himself not to be very good at that. My experience on the township board, as well as president of my condo association, will enable me to be an effective supervisor, and my communication skills will help me build consensus and achieve positive results for our township.
And I'm sorry, excuse me, Mr. Styka.
Thank you. First, I want to thank all the viewers out there for tuning us in on a night when there's a presidential debate. They're going to be debated out by the end of the evening. I'm Ron Styka. I'm running for Township Supervisor. I believe that I'm the best person for the position for many reasons. Three primarily. I have the experience, the skills, and the temperament to serve as the supervisor. I moved to the township back in 1978 with my wife, Georgia. We raised our 4 sons here. She taught in Oklahoma schools. We are very much part of this community. I have the experience, the skills, and the temperament, as I said. My experience goes back to my being an assistant attorney general for almost 40 years, to being on the Oklahoma School Board for 22 years, for serving for the last 4 years as a trustee. All of these things have given me the background, the experience for working on a township board. I have also developed skills from that in terms of running meetings, in terms of working with others. And finally, I have the temperament, which goes with that. I've shown that I can actually bring people together, eliminate rancor, and I'm looking forward that having the position of supervisor, I can actually do that in the township.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's good to have you here. And while we wait for your calls, tweets, and Facebook questions, we do have a standard list of questions that we will begin. For this debate, each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the questions. When both candidates have answered the question, then we'll offer anyone who desires a 30-second rebuttal. And we'll begin alphabetically with the first question and then alternate who answers first with each following question. So the first question I have for both of you gentlemen is, what is your record as a public official to show that you are the right leader for the township? And Mr. Klunzinger, we'll start with you.
Well, I've served 2 terms on the township board, first as a trustee, 4 years, and then second as treasurer, both in the 20th century. But I think I'm well equipped to do the job in the 21st century. And as I said, I'm president of my condo board for the past 3 years, and that certainly has been an experience in itself. But the main thing that we need as a supervisor is to bring consensus and cooperation on the township board. And, well, gosh, I'm an award-winning playwright, so I think I'm well able to do that. I understand the power of words and would use the proper words to communicate with fellow board members and get everybody working together. And I think that's what it's all about, really.
Mr. Styka, to you.
Obviously, I have the power of words as well. As an attorney, I've had to persuade courts for many years, juries. I'm very familiar with communication and the process of it. I have had the experience in my years as the a member and president of the Okemos School Board, of working with others and bringing very divergent people together, having them work together in a way that was not filled with rancor, where they were able to come to consensus. This is something I take pride in. I think the public has seen me do this and appreciates it, and for that reason they have supported me. I also had those kinds of experiences in terms of working with state agencies. I was counsel to many different state departments and commissions over the years, and would sit at their board meetings, help them with their board meetings. And I've also been president of the Briarwood Homeowners Association for a number of years. I've been president of other organizations, such as our local Knights of Columbus group, my church council, lots of various organizations.
Would either of you like to rebut?
Oh, just a follow-up question. Can you get the clerk and treasurer to kiss and make up?
I can sure do my best. How about you?
I would work on that.
All right. Question and answer. That's part of the format I had prepared for. So the next question I have, we'll start with Mr. Styka for this one. What is the proper role of the township supervisor in serving the community, and how would you fit that role? Mr. Styka.
The proper role of the township supervisor is not to be a micromanager, but to work in the broad sense with the manager to lead the meetings. The board, which consists of 7 members, sets the policy. No one person, not even the supervisor, can set the policy. It's a collective, collegial decision that happens. Once that policy is set, because we have a managerial style here, where we have hired a manager, the supervisor would then work with that manager, primarily with the manager carrying out the functions and duties in terms of the day-to-day operations of the township. I would have office hours. People could come in and see me on a regular basis here. I would work with resolving complaints and helping citizens, but always through the staff, through the manager first.
And just a technical issue we had, there was a beep earlier, and that wasn't the time up. And so you did end your question at the beep, so I definitely want to offer you.
Fine.
Okay, all right. Mr. Klunzinger, same question for you. The question, what is the proper role of the township supervisor?
Well, as Mr. Styka said, it's very much leading the board in deliberations and building consensus. I think of late, that has seemed to be a job akin to herding cats, because they all have independent opinions and don't seem to talk to each other. I think the supervisor has to be proactive in that respect and actively talk to various members of the board to get their opinions on a particular issue, and if they have concerns, try to work that out ahead of time so that it's not bogged down in little questions at the board meeting, so that the people can see the business of the township moving together. And office hours, yes, the prime point of contact as the chief elected official for the township. But of course, the manager is supreme in running the day-to-day business for the township. And then of course, the supervisor has to select the best people for the appointments. So it's a two-pronged thing. One is building consensus, and the other is getting the best people to serve on the various boards and commissions.
Okay. Rebuttal?
No real rebuttal. I think we've both said in different words basically the same thing. And I look forward to having that job and carrying out those duties.
The same.
All right. Well, we have our first call. We have Catherine from Okemos. She is on the line. Catherine, go ahead with your call, please.
Oh, is this
Catherine, yeah.
Kathleen?
Oh, I'm sorry, Kathleen. Go ahead with your
Oh,
question.
that's okay. Good evening. Most private companies, including Michigan state government, have moved away from defined benefit retirement programs for all new employees. The state made the change in 1997, nearly 20 years ago. And as recent as yesterday, Comerica announced major changes in their retirement programs, part of an overall cost-saving plan. Meridian Township is still using this outdated, excessively expensive golden parachute defined benefit retirement program that has multipliers from 2.0 to 2.75. To add some perspective, the state multiplier in the defined benefit program was 1.5. That means that some Meridian Township employees that have the same salary and years of service would retire with nearly twice the income as the state worker. So my question to you both, what will you do to assure the citizens of Meridian Township that changes will be made to the township's employees' retirement system that will reflect today's standards and protect taxpayers from the current exorbitant retirement costs? Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen, for the question, and we start with Mr. Klunzinger for that.
Well, as supervisor, I would be just one member of the 7-member board, and that would ultimately have to be a board decision. But before that, it would require the manager working with the all the constituent unions of the township to achieve agreement to a lower rate of return on the benefits. I mean, these are the township employees who've given many years of service to the township, the police, the fire, and all of our clerical employees. So we can't just unilaterally act to chop the benefits. We have to achieve agreement, and I think people understand that that is a looming problem for the township, and the legacy costs, as everybody says, are a major financial concern for the years ahead. So that definitely needs to be addressed, and it will take a lot of working together within the staff, with the union heads, and the township board to achieve what's best for Meridian Township.
Mr. Styka, Kathleen's question to you.
Yes, it's a very good question, Kathleen, and I can understand why you have grave concerns. As you've probably heard watching various board meetings, that we have a $26 million currently, growing all the time, problem in terms of legacy costs. There are 7 unions here that work with us in the township, and the current benefits that we do have the large multipliers from 2 to 2.75 were negotiated back in an era when actually Mr. Klunzinger was on the board previously. And they are very high compared to, for example, I am a state retiree. My multiplier was 1.5, and I had a little carrot of a 0.1, so mine ended up being 1.6. And that is more what I would expect in terms of a proper multiplier. But we're in a situation now where we have these existing contracts, we have these benefits, we have people that came to work understanding that that's what their benefit would be, and we're actually legally not able to just take those away. When the state made its change, I was a state employee, and I kept my defined benefit. I did not switch to defined contribution. I had some coworkers who ended up very sorry that they did, because their retirements were nowhere near mine, because the marketplace didn't do that well for them. But in any event, we do need to move forward. We do have a plan. The manager's been putting together that plan. He's working right now, negotiating with all 7 unions to see if we can lower those multipliers on a prospective basis, and then bring it within a sphere where we can all afford it, because ultimately we all pay for it. That is happening now. I would continue that process until it comes to completion. Try to get the multipliers down to a reasonable value. And for new employees, definitely have a much lower multiplier.
Okay. And do you have a rebuttal?
Only that I was aware that, as mentioned at the state in the 90s, when that problem was realized and they phased out the old plan, there was a considered effort to encourage retirement of people who had the superior defined benefits, and then all the new hires would be under the less expensive plan.
Mr. Styka, any more?
Yeah, that's more or less true. The employees at the time had a choice. A few of them took the new defined contribution plan, but most of them stayed with the defined benefit. And new employees did have to come under the new plan. We can approach something similar here in the township, but that's all depending on our new union negotiations, which are ongoing right now.
Okay. We have another caller with a question. Julie from East Lansing, go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, my question is for both of the Township Board Supervisor candidates about what their plans for development in Meridian Township are, and what their stance is on bringing development and how they plan to do that in a contained way, or if they're pro-development.
Okay, great. Thank you, Julie. Mr. Styka, we start with you.
Thank you for that question. I am a smart development person, which means I'm neither pro nor against development. It's sort of an in-between position. I think in Meridian, we have a rural section of the township that should stay rural to the extent that is possible. But we also have a developed portion of the township. And that developed portion has portions that have businesses that have closed with empty buildings. We have some places where we can infill. For example, there's a project going in, about to go in down around Jolly and Okemos Road. It's in the middle of an area that's already developed. So we have some of that, and that should continue. I am not in favor of this township continuing to grow exponentially. Right now we're at about 42,000 people. I would see us in a neighborhood of 45, 46,000 in the long term. But I think development is important, and it helps our tax base. Some people say, well, you know, we don't want to raise our taxes. Well, one way of not raising our taxes is to have more taxpayers. To some extent, the additional people do add to our service burden, but it has been shown that the amount of money we take in, for example, from a new development usually exceeds what we need to add in terms of police or fire. So I'm for smart development, smart growth. Smart growth also means putting things where they're needed. We would like to have a walkable, bikeable community so that within neighborhood, or within distance, a reasonable distance in neighborhoods, we have small developing areas that have services and things that people need on a daily basis. Not big mall areas, but small areas with services such as cleaners and little groceries, et cetera. And that's all part of smart development too, becoming walkable and bikeable, infilling rather than adding on. In terms of the eastern portion of the township and doing things right.
Mr. Klunzinger, same question.
Well, yes, as you referred to the east end of the township, I think the reality is not much can be done there until the water and sewer gets extended out there, and I don't see that happening. But you referred to the statistic that really the best development is new commercial development. You referred to empty storefronts and such. That's the best kind because they're there from sort of 8 to 5 and don't make a great many demands on township services like police and fire and produce good tax revenue. But so far as we don't have that much in the way of undeveloped tracts left, farms and whatever, that would be rezoned for lots of houses. So I think we're entering the period, we have entered the period, where we are sensibly managing what we have and certainly encouraging new commercial occupants, different from commercial development, and make Meridian Township seen as a business-friendly place to locate for these potential new taxpayers.
Mr. Styka, anything follow up on that?
Yes, I do. We have 3 core areas in the township that we have really been concentrating on trying to develop. That is the old downtown Okemos area, the Hazlet Village Square, and the Carriage Hills area. We need to be proactive to have those areas which are becoming kind of ghost townish, become active, good places for people to go and to see and to live and to help their lifestyle.
Mr. Klunzinger, anything to add?
I am against ghost town business areas and encourage lived-in storefronts.
All right, we're waiting for some more calls, 517-349-1232. I'll return to my list until we get something else. Describe how you would run an efficient township board meeting. And we start with Mr. Klunzinger for that one.
I would say for a view of this, you should come to a board meeting of the Meridian Hills Condo Association. That's been quite lively over the past year or two, and more rambunctious, if you can believe that, than the township board. But you have to follow the agenda, give everyone a fair chance to speak, starting with public remarks. And I think I would actively discourage other board members from making disparaging comments about fellow board members at the board meeting. And that can help a lot to the public perception that things are going along as they should, rather than being hung up on petty personal differences. I think the main thing is to make sure the agenda moves along. Don't let anything go on too long, and make sure there is fair and equal consideration of all points of view.
Okay. Mr. Styka.
Very similar answer. I have had the opportunity acting as pro tem supervisor when the supervisor was absent about 5 times in the last year or a year and a half, to serve as the head of the meetings. And I think people saw a big difference in terms of how those meetings were run versus the experience we've had in recent times. My experience tells me that you lead by example. You have to be fair, and you have to give people an opportunity to speak. But when people are getting out of hand and going in directions where they shouldn't, or they've already spoken on, you have to gently remind them and move them back to where they should be. The gavel is there. We seldom use it, but if we have to use the gavel to keep things moving. The agenda is the guide that is used at the meetings, and it should be followed. The public has to have their opportunity. Right now we have many opportunities for the public to speak at our meetings. They could speak on any subject at the beginning, and then they could speak more narrowly at the different sections, whether it's an action item or a discussion item, and then generally at the end. I think it's important that when the public does speak in those times, that they're fair to others by directing their remarks according to those categories. Sometimes people kind of repeat themselves 3-4 times. Sometimes when it's supposed to be about the action items, they talk about other things. And that would be up to the chair, the supervisor, to hopefully kindly and forcefully in a way, get them to do what they're supposed to be doing and talking about the matters that they're supposed to talk about. The length of the meetings really comes about because we do allow a lot of public comment, which is good. Not so much because the board members are interacting too much. Board members need to interact. You know, it's a meeting of the board held in public. It's not a public meeting or a meeting of the public. And supervisor keeps that in mind. I think he move the agenda and keep people moving in a positive way.
Any rebuttal or follow-up on that, Mr. Klunzinger?
Question.
October is National Bullying Prevention Awareness Month. And the Michigan Education Association recently released a press release about the Trump effect. As a leader, how would you ensure that this type of bullying politics doesn't trickle down to the local level? And we start with Mr. Styka for this one.
Well, that's a toughie because we can't always control what other people think or do. But I think, again, leading by example, using my skills in terms of working with other people and getting people to come together, my experience in bringing about collegiality on various boards and commissions and the school board, as well as the few times I've been able to actually run the meeting in the last 4 years. I think with all of that, you just take command and lead by example in terms of avoiding the bullying. There has been some bullying at our township board meetings, and that is something that we have to stop. Changing the subject just a little bit, the school districts within the township have to deal with this as well. I know in the Okemos schools where I served on the board, there are some rather strong policies against bullying, and there's a lot of educational sessions that go on. We could certainly have some educational sessions for the board. Every board can learn how to be a board, to how to improve its progress and how it functions. We used to do this at the school board where periodically, maybe once, twice a year, we would have a consultant come in to talk about meetings and our interactions and how that's going so that we could better function to carry out the people's business and to do it in a meaningful way. The township board should really look at considering that, and as supervisor, I would encourage that.
Mr. Klunzinger?
Well, there are many forms of bullying. There at the township board meeting is probably the most visible and controllable. Very difficult in terms of the public making public remarks because they could contend that's freedom of speech. If there is perceived bullying by a fellow board member of another board member of the public, I believe the chair supervisor does have the power to rule such remarks out of order. That then becomes a ruling of the chair, and if the offender wishes to keep going, that requires a motion from the board to overrule that ruling. But again, there's bullying in other forms, campaign bullying, and again, the supervisor can take the lead in denouncing such activities, not just in the immediate board meeting, but in the township at large, and as Mr. Styka said, to lead by example.
Anything else?
I think we've answered.
All right. What do you think the township is in need most of, and why? Mr. Klunzinger, you get to answer that first.
More money. We hear that the coming budget is going to be tight, and a lot of that has to do with the legacy costs. But there's also one very big thing that was considered a few years ago, and that's the authorized millage, which is authorized by law at 5 mills. But with headly reductions in the 20th century, mostly it's down to 4.2. And it's always bothered me that other taxing agencies like CATA, CADL, the library, and maybe the school districts, I've lost track, have asked for headly overrides and generally received it. But the township generally hasn't, except in 2010. It was requested and turned down. I think part of the reason, I was not aware of that, I missed it, sorry. I think it wasn't very well promoted or sold, and it was asking for a large amount of money. Give us this money and trust us with it. Possibly a phased override, 1/10 of a mill each year to build back up to the 5 mills. Because if the township were getting the regular 5 mills as authorized by law, when other agencies are getting their fully authorized millage, that would go a long way towards solving some of the budget difficulties which have been ongoing.
Okay. Mr. Styka?
Well, starting with the comments that were made by my opponent, actually our budget is in pretty good shape here in the township. Sure, more money is nice, but I don't want to ask the taxpayers for more money unless I have a actual purpose for it, something that the township people want to do and want it spent on before I go to them. What the township really needs, which was the beginning question, is really more of the same. Periodically, every few years, a survey is taken of the township residents. We just did that a year ago. Township residents like our township. They like what's happening here. They like the lives that they lead here, the neighborhoods. What they don't like, for example, is I mentioned the 3 areas that need to be developed: downtown Okemos, Haslet Square, and the Carriage Hills area. They don't like the fact that those areas are languishing. But they do like all the parks, all the natural areas, so the walkways. So I guess the first thing is to maintain those. And the township budget has to be spent in a way that makes sense in terms of maintaining those. So far, we've been able to do that. We have an excellent township manager who is very, very severe in terms of making sure the dollars are spent the right way in the right amounts. And that's good. So we need to keep maintaining what we have, but we also need to encourage the development in those 3 core areas. And so that's what I really see the needs to be. Oh, there is one other thing.
You still have time.
Okay. Streets, the roads. A big complaint of the residents, including myself, is the maintenance. We are only able to do a limited amount of maintenance each year. We have about $300,000 thanks to a millage that people voted for. We add into that another $400,000 or so. That's not nearly enough. I think there's room in our current budget to find a way to add to that and to spend more on the roads.
Mr. Klunzinger, do you have something to add?
Well, just that I'm not advocating higher taxes. I'm advocating equity. When the other taxing entities have been able to levy the full millage, but the township government in general has not. And in any case, it's the voters that would approve whatever tax rate is levied.
And do you want 30 seconds? Okay. Well, I want to take this opportunity to let you know and our viewers at home that we are just over halfway. If you want to participate in tonight's debate, call in with questions for the candidates by dialing 349-1232, or again, participate through social media on Twitter and Facebook using our handle HOMTV, #Ballot Meridian. Tonight's debate is with the candidates for the Meridian Township Supervisor. So we do have a call right now. We have Jane from Okemos. Jane, go ahead with your question, please.
Thanks. How do you plan to attract young professionals to the area?
Okay, Mr. Styka, we start with you for that question.
Well, young professionals, in my experience, and of course I'm now an old professional, but in my experience, young professionals are drawn to areas where there are things for them to do, where there's a lifestyle that makes things interesting for them. What we need to do then is to encourage the right kind of development in those three areas I mentioned before, in terms of maybe restaurants, maybe even a little nightclubby type place. We need to have activities for the young professionals. We also need to have the right kind of housing. Young professionals aren't necessarily looking to own a house. That has been shown recently, especially with millennials. They're often looking instead to rent a nice place. We are developing some of those within the township. Some already exist. So we need not to foreclose that door, but to have those there. We are close to the Michigan State University. I like to say we're in the shadow, to use a little bit of a pun if you understand the MSU's alma mater. We're in the shadow of MSU, and that's important because there's a lot of activities there that young professionals might like to participate in, whether it's the sports activities, the Wharton Center, the arts, the music, et cetera. So I think we're a community that has a lot for young professionals, and we need to get the word out. The township is undertaking branding. Very soon now we will hear what our consultants and the various community committees have come up with in terms of branding, because we need to be out there as one Meridian so people know who we are. They just don't think of East Lansing or Lansing, but they think of Meridian as a place, as a destination, a place to go. And I think as that all happens and it builds, young professionals will be drawn here, and I look forward to that because I think they're good citizens to have.
Mr. Klunzinger?
Well, I think it's important to make the distinction. There are two types of young professionals, those with children, those without. And for those with children, I think they're looking at the school districts first as a place to locate. And we have 4 excellent school districts within Meridian Township. That also includes the Williamston School District, which gets the southeast corner. And so the consideration would be first the school districts and the amenities that go with that, parks, sporting availability, and then of course support services. But then for the unmarried professionals, and I was impressed, in 2010, the census of Meridian Township showed that for the first time, single person households were in the majority in Meridian Township. Not the traditional nuclear family, but single person households of the household units in Meridian Township. And you see a lot of developments now that are aimed towards the single young professionals. And we have the Studio C Cinema and all the attractions at the Meridian Mall. But as I said earlier, if we can encourage commercial enterprises to locate here with a goal towards pitching it to the younger professionals, that will be so much the better. So we have to be proactive and business friendly as we're seeking to attract new businesses and new residents.
Okay. Offer 30 seconds if you have more.
Yes. Yes, I ran out of time earlier. There definitely is also the young professionals who are family young professionals. And I think the things that Mr. Klunzinger mentioned are also very important for them. We do offer in Meridian Township outstanding school districts. I've been the liaison to the 4 school districts while I've been a trustee the last 4 years, and I served on the Okemos board for 22 years. And I can tell you that education in this community is higher on average among all people, whether they're the children or the adults, than anywhere.
Mr. Klunzinger, anything more?
No.
Okay. We are coming up on Meridian Township's 175th anniversary. We'll be starting to celebrate that January 1st, 2017. I'm curious to know, I want to give you the opportunity to share your history in Meridian Township. And for this question, we start with Mr. Klunzinger.
Well, my family has a lot of history here. George Hudson came here in the 1880s. The Hudson Farm was out Mount Hope, corner of Hagedorn. It's all apartments now. The turn of the century, 1900, he delivered mail to the western half of the township. Well, he had the contract, but he was also a Baptist minister who'd ride the circuit, so he informed his wife, raising the 6 kids, that she would be delivering the mail in addition to raising the kids and running the farm. But that's how it was at that time. And then my mother grew up here, went to Okemos High School, and I've landed back here. I'm planning to bring the Hudson Mail Wagon back for the celebrations. It's in the MSU Museum under the football stadium. And for the 150th, I wrote a play called Okemos Passing, which was presented at Riverwalk Theater. And it would be nice to stage that again. It's about Okemos in the 1850s and features old Chief Okemos interacting with the newly arrived settlers in the village of Hamilton before it became Okemos. Did you know it was Hamilton?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's it.
Mr. Styka.
I can't claim to go back hundreds of years, but I can tell you that we purposely moved to Meridian Township in 1978. My wife and I, at that time we had 3 young boys, eventually had 4. Because of this community and its education reputation, we've become a part of this community, part of its thread, if you will. We both are active in so many organizations, and we're both history nuts. My wife taught history at Okemos High School, and history is one of my avocations. I love history. I have studied the history of Okemos and Hazlet, as well as the township collectively, but the early history is basically those 2 areas. And of Chief, the Ogima, or as he's known, Chief Okemos. And I'm very much involved. My wife is a docent at the Historical Village, and she's part of the Meridian Garden Club. I am involved with many organizations within the township, and I have given talks, for example, to the Historical Society, which I belong to here, the Friends of Historic Meridian, on the history of the Okemos Public Schools, which are about 175 years old also, maybe 173, something like that. I'm very much part of this community.
Well, I'm not going to ask you to rebut each other's histories, but do you have additional 30 seconds that you'd like to take?
Friends of Historic Meridian. I joined that in 1976, thinking it was the old established historical group, and later found out that it had just been founded 2 years earlier. So I was sort of there at the beginning with that, and I participated at the Historic Village in various programs over the years.
Mr. Styka, anything more? All right. Well, we've got a caller. We have Chris from Okemos. Go ahead with your question for the candidates.
Yep. What's your opinion on the Canada BRT project?
For this one, we start with Mr. Styka.
I am very much in favor of public transportation. It is something that is very, very key to any community. And we are helped a lot by CATA in terms of the main routes, which are Route 1 down Grand River, as well, and eventually ends up in downtown Lansing, as well as the ancillary routes 23, 22 that go up into Hazlet and down into Okemos. The BRT is basically a replacement for, as proposed, a replacement for Route 1, which would be center running, a different, more modern style of bus with stations in the middle of the road. And many community members have looked at this and spoken out about concerns over, one, with the center running situation and the dedicated lanes, business opportunities being lost because people can't make left turns except at traffic signals, potential safety issues for handicapped, blind, and others trying to get to the stations in the middle of the street. There have been expressions of concerns about winter when you're trying to get to those stations. There have been concerns about the cost of the whole thing, $133 million for 7-minute saving. Could that savings be found in other ways by timing lights, Could the efficiencies that are talked about be found with maybe better bus schedules, more buses at the times when they're full, less when they're not so full? There's a whole lot of concerns. So as part of the current township board, I voted along with the majority to oppose the current configuration of the BRT. It does not mean that I don't like having mass transit. It doesn't mean that I don't want to see more of it, but I had to vote against the current configuration.
Mr. Klunzinger?
About BRT, good concept, bad plan. The concept was established about 100 years ago after World War I with the interurban system, not just in Michigan and the Lansing area, but all over the country, as a system of light rail radiating out from the central urban areas. But then in the 30s, the auto companies and the tire companies bought up the interurban companies and ripped up the tracks, so people would have to buy their cars and use their rubber to run them on. And after World War II, everybody got used to getting everywhere in their cars, their private automobiles. Then, much later, in other areas, as well as here, people said, maybe that's not the best thing. But when you try to retrofit mass transit on an area that no longer has the rights of way, that becomes extremely expensive, as in Los Angeles. Now, this current plan is basically pasting mass transit on existing rights of way, and that, as Mr. Styka has said, just doesn't work for the details he's mentioned. Experience has shown that to make it work, you have to get new dedicated rights of way, which would require lots of money to buy up the property. I'm not saying we should do that, but that's what it would need to make it work well, or build something overland or underground to achieve the transit success that you want. So it needs to be rethought a lot.
Additional comments, Mr. Styka?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. The BRT is a concept that just isn't being designed the right way to actually make a difference here for our community. I would like to see improvements in public transportation, but the current plan just isn't it.
Mr. Klunzinger? Okay, well, I want to thank Chris for that question. And now we have a question from Aaron. Aaron from Hazlitt, go ahead with your question.
Yes, my question is for both candidates. I was curious, what is your greatest professional accomplishment, and how would you, how would that help you actually in your position as township supervisor?
Okay, Aaron, thank you for that question. We start with Mr. Klunzinger.
Greatest professional accomplishment? Well, I've been a member of the Dramatists Guild since 1981, and have won several awards for playwriting, most recently 2011. And so that indicates skill with communication, working with words. And as I said earlier, I think that is a prime element of success, for success, as the township supervisor, is communicating with the other board members to achieve consensus, and communicating with the public to let them know that the people's business is moving forward.
Mr. Styka?
Well, as an attorney, when I was in law school, I had a calling to public service. So instead of, as my roommates did, who I'm still friends with and see occasionally, going into private practice at law firms where there were many benefits, I chose to work for the state, the Attorney General's office. And the primary reason was because I just care about people. I care about the issues that people have to deal with. And as an assistant attorney general, I was, blessed in a way, because I didn't have to represent somebody just because they had the money for me to represent them. Instead, I got to take the positions that made sense for the people as a whole. I got to represent the people as a whole. Over those years, there were many, many cases that I would consider, great accomplishments, whether they involved hospitals and making sure they were doing what needed to be done, or got to be built where they needed to be built, or whether it involved taking away licenses from practitioners who were abusing their patients. I mean, I had many, many different kinds of accomplishments over the years as an attorney. and they were all equally important in the sense that they affected individuals, and I was able to maybe accomplish some positive, maybe in small ways sometimes, maybe in larger ways at other times. And I think that all of that helps me in terms of being a potential supervisor. Again, as a supervisor, I would be being able to live out my goal of being a public servant to helping people, in this case on a smaller scale with individual problems, whether it's whether a project can get built somewhere, whether we need a park, whether the roads need fixing. These are all important on a day-to-day basis to people, and I look forward to doing that as well.
Mr. Klunzinger, follow-up, 30 seconds?
No, I think I've said it.
All right. Let's talk priorities. What would be your top 3 priorities for the township if elected? And for this one, we go to Mr. Styka first.
Well, the top priority is, I really already said these. Number 1, more or less keeping what we have in terms of the lifestyles, the ability to enjoy life here in Meridian Township with all of our parks, our trails. Improving those is part of that same top priority, so that we have good streets, good places to recreate, ability to get around and to visit the services and the stores, et cetera, that we need, and to have excellent education for our students, our children, et cetera. My second one would be the development of those 3 areas I mentioned before, the downtown Okemos, the Haslet Village Square, and the Carriage Hills areas, so that we have these magnet areas where people can do the things they need to do. They can be drawn in, businesses can be drawn in to provide jobs. That would be my second one. And then my third one is dealing with this legacy cost that we have on pensions. That's very important for the township because that's a lot of money that we have to find a way to resolve and fix. We're not going to be able to do it overnight. Right now, with the help of the manager and his staff, the board is working on what would be basically a 10 or 12-year plan to bring that under control so that we could be paying the pensions that we need to pay for those who have already retired, but also changing it so in the future we don't get into the same problem over again. A lot of communities are facing this throughout the state. I think we're trying to take the most educated route to solving it. Some places are doing bonds and other things, but they're not really fixing the problem. We want to both fix the problem and find a solution to what has already occurred. So we want to be proactive, prospectively, and fix what happened in the past.
Mr. Klunzinger, top 3 priorities.
Well, maintain our excellent quality of life, and then make Meridian Township perhaps more business-friendly to attract the economic tax base that we need. And then third, and this has 2 parts, is to achieve equity of our tax funding, as I discussed earlier about the Headley overrides, so that we can deal with the legacy costs and improve the roads as much as possible.
Okay. Follow-up, Mr. Styka?
I don't know if I can add a fourth one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, come on.
That's all right.
So what we do have time for, one last call. We have time for one last call from Andrea. Andrea from Okemos, go ahead with your question.
Hi, my question for the candidates is, what would your plans be to encourage relationships with other entities?
Okay, thank you, Andrea.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I couldn't quite hear.
To encourage relationships with other entities. And so we start with Mr. Klunzinger on that one.
Well, we certainly should have talking relationships with other entities. During my first term on the township board 35 years ago, I saw a member of the Okemos School Board and said, "Can we get together, have a meeting soon?" And he said, "Why should we?" Okay. But I think that may have changed since then. The point is to keep talking and cooperate on things where we can share resources. There has been some talk of regionalism and sharing things like police and fire, but the problem there is that these are separately funded in the various communities and set up to be serve the people in those communities because they're paid for by the people in those communities. So while we should certainly maintain a cooperative relationship with our surrounding city governments. I don't think entering into cost and service sharing is going to be practical in the near term.
Mr. Styka?
Regionalism is extremely important to me. When I was on the Oklahoma School Board, we did in fact establish regular meetings with the township and the other school districts, and that is still going on. In fact, the Meridian Township Board has an annual meeting with all the other communities. We have the mayor or some representative from Lansing coming in. This year it was the mayor. We have East Lansing's mayor coming in. We have various townships around us and other, Williamston. We have the different school districts, all representatives coming together at a table. We talk about issues that we all face to see if we can find ways that we can work together. I would continue that, maybe even advance that to a more often schedule. In addition to that, Meridian Township has become a leader in terms of regionalism. Right now, we provide, under an agreement with Williamstown Township, police protection to Williamstown Township. Saves both our township and their township money and serves those people well. We do the same thing with the northern part of Eldon Township, which is just over our border in terms of fire. We share our water and sewer system with East Lansing. We share our assessor with East Lansing. This way, both communities have a top quality assessor that we both don't need a full time, but a half time works well. That works for us. In terms of regionalism also, I have had good relationships with the neighboring leaders. In fact, Mayor Meadows and I, who have a long history, being assistant attorneys general together a long time ago, we got together and helped iron out the agreements that are going to allow Costco to come in on our border. It's land that used to be part of Meridian, and then through a long process and a state act became really East Lansing, but we have some say in it. We work together in a regional way to make sure that that project can move. It's not there yet. There's still some hurdles for it to go over, but that's happening. So I'm very much about it, and I've got experience with it, and I'm looking forward to more of it.
Would you have more to add, Mr. Klunzinger?
Well, just that it has to be on a contract basis. We can't say, sure, take our assessor, take our police. There's a quid pro quo there, and that's good. I will remember 35 years ago, in my first term, the water sewer extended down Okemos Road, and that by East Lansing Meridian Water Sewer Authority, and that enabled all the development down there at Okemos and Jolly in Allen Township.
Mr. Styka, anything more?
No, I again would reiterate that I think it's an important principle. It could save all communities money, and I look forward to furthering that.
Okay, well, we don't have time for any more phone calls, but I just want to ask you both one last question before we're done. What inspired you to run as supervisor for the township? And we start with Mr. Styka for this one.
Well, serving as a trustee, I noticed that we needed to have good, strong leadership here in the township. I have a lot of respect for our current supervisor. She has done her best at the job, but I think I can add a little more. And so I became inspired to move up, to try to move up to the position of supervisor. It's up to the voters whether I do or not. And also because, as I said before, I have a strong feeling of public service, and this would be a very good way for me to express that internal feeling, to be there trying to help people in the community, and that's why I did it.
Mr. Klunzinger.
Well, somewhat the same. Our family has a recessive gene for public service. My great uncle was congressman from this area. My aunt was U.S. ambassador to New Zealand. And so I served one term as a trustee, another term as treasurer. And so when this year came up, I have just recently, as I referred to earlier, served 3 years as president of the Meridian Hills Condo Board. And that's vigorous training for chairing any group. And so I do believe that with the rancor that has been referred to of recent on this township board, that should that happen again, I would be best able to deal with that, bring it under control, and achieve positive results to move ahead for Meridian Township.
All right, as we come to the end of our program, I want to offer the both of you closing statements. So you each get 30 seconds, and we alphabetically are going to start with you, Mr. Styka, because we began with Mr. Klunzinger with the introductions.
First, I want to thank you and HOMTV and all the viewers out there for this opportunity to tell the voters of Meridian about myself, about my campaign, and my desire to become a supervisor. As I said before, I think I am the right person for the position. I think I've shown that the 4 or 5 times that I've actually run the meeting here. I've shown that through my experience in the Oklahoma School Board, et cetera, and I look forward to having that support from all of our voters on November 8th.
Thank you very much. Mr. Klunzinger?
Well, again, thank you for having us here and giving us the opportunity to share our ideas and vision for Meridian Township. I believe I have the experience and the ability to be a good supervisor, and I hope you'll vote for me, Tom Klunzinger, on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and I want to thank you for watching the Meridian Township Supervisor Debate. Don't go anywhere. We've got another live debate in just a moment for the Ingham County Commissioner 12th District race between Republican candidate Christopher Possat and Democratic incumbent candidate Deb Nolan. As a reminder, HOMTV's Ballot Meridian election coverage is available online at HOMTV.net. I'm Eric Sherman. Thank you for watching, and we will be right back.